Welcome to the Universal Monsters Podcast, the show where two white guys pre-cancel themselves about 5 to 10 years from now. I'm your host, Jake, author of The Devil's League and creator of hot quality content, and with me, as always, is the creator and host of Screenplay Archaeology, Pyramid Head, aka Bruce. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Me too. And every month, my fine co-host and I break down a bunch of Universal Monster news across movies, shows, theme parks, physical media, and anything else regarding these classic monsters. After that, we discuss the topic and the title of the episode. So, are you ready for some news, which may or may not be bigger than our usual news on this show?
I'm always ready.
Alright, well, I got two things. Let's get the short, not as interesting thing out of the way real quick. In the latest of several trends, Funko is releasing a line of Pops portraying Care Bears fused with Universal monsters.
What?
There's more. Yeah, there's more to the story, but I stopped looking into it as soon as I read the headline. What do you think?
I'm more confused than anything. Care Bears are still a thing?
I'm thinking about it purely as like a dude in a business suit who has a law degree running the company, and he's just like, yes, this Ninja Turtles Universal Monster crossover worked well. Let's just pick a new IP and fuck it. I don't even care what it is. Slap it on there.
Sounds like it has similar energy to that Minecraft trailer.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Except people are gonna go see and buy that and actually care about it.
God, I hope not.
Hey, a lot of kids are gonna beg their parents because it says Minecraft on it.
Really?
You know? It
Minecraft hasn't. Is Minecraft even still a popular thing?
By some metrics, it's the most popular game ever. I don't know if it's the most money making. By some degree, it's up there with Fortnite and GTA as like the most game ever with people, most popular, most whatever. So yeah, that movie is gonna. But then again, to controverse my own point, I mean, the Pokemon movie didn't do very well, and that is one of the most successful franchises of all time. So I don't know.
That's actually a good movie, too.
With that amazing, gripping, in-depth topic down, let's go on to the silly other piece of news. Lee Whannell's long-awaited Wolfman has dropped its first trailer. The
Holy
official
crap.
logo and poster have all been revealed, and it's got a little bit of controversy for one small section. Now, let's just first talk about the trailer itself.
Yes,
before we
that's
get
what I
into
wanted to do.
the
That's
design.
what I wanted
So,
to do.
why don't you take the lead on this? What do you think about that trailer?
I think it's a great teaser. I mean, I think starting it off with nature footage is maybe a little on the nose.
I mean,
or-
the
or
location's
maybe-
only going to be a forest, you know?
Yeah, and they're maybe they're teasing a reboot of the Deadly Mantis. But seriously, no, I think it looks really good. I think it looks pretty tense. I like that it seems to be like this progressive change, almost like the Fly, like Cronenberg's Fly. Like it seems like he's going to be going through a progressive change over the movie.
Yeah, it sounds fun.
And comparing it to like an illness, I think that could be really cool. And just the little bits we see are intriguing. Like they don't show much Wolfman. You see a little bit. You see a little bit through a sniper scope, and you see something kind of running along on all fours, and like a hand crashes through the windshield at the end. I think it could be a really good movie. It looks like it's kind of reminds me a little bit of Dog Soldiers, but not British.
I watched this trailer. Now, granted, for context, it was my most anticipated. Not most. It was in the top like 3 or 4 most anticipated for this year. Like Deadpool and Wolverine was number 1 for me.
Yeah.
Then it got bumped to next year. My guy, as it stands, it's probably a number 1. Now I'm biased because it's coming out sooner than all the other movies of 2024.
It's
so
easier to get
obviously
excited for.
Easier to get excited for. There's trailers, there's posters. I'm jazzed. But it's Lee Whannell coming back to direct a Universal Monster movie. He's only done one, and it is one of my favorite movies ever. It is maybe my favorite Universal Monster movies. On some days I think it is. On some days it's second. But it's easily one of the best ones Universal Monsters have ever had. That Invisible Man movie. I can defend it all day long. So the fact that he's coming back for another one, and this one was his choice, because remember, Invisible Man was offered to him and he accepted. This is a movie that he said, I had an idea for a Wolfman movie that's also Universal Monster that I would do if I could. This is him being able to. So I'm more excited for this. I'm over the moon about it. So going into the trailer, that's where my head was at. Watching the trailer, it looks like a standard horror movie trailer for a movie from January or February. It could go either way, you know. A lot of movies have a trailer just like this and have 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of movies have a trailer like this and they're Get Out and they're like the best thing ever, you know. So as far as the trailer goes, it doesn't really tell me much. In fact, it purposely doesn't tell you anything.
It's a teaser.
It's a teaser. It's the first taste of the movie that we have so far, so I'm not holding that against the trailer at all. But needless to say, I am no more or less jazzed than I was yesterday. I'm just very happy that it exists now, that we have some footage for it, and we see Christopher Abbott just a little bit, just looking scared as all hell, because
Yeah.
we as the audience know it's coming. So that's fun.
Yeah. And it's exciting that it's actually happening because this has been on and off for like 4 years now.
Oh yeah.
Where it was like where it was going to be Winnell and Ryan Gosling, and then Winnell left to do Escape from New York, and that didn't happen. And then he was going to do Green Hornet, and then that didn't happen. And then it was Gosling and the Place Beyond the Pines guy were going to do it, and then they left.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that I was imagining at certain points, like during the trailer, like seeing Gosling's face, imagining that world. That probably would not be a January film. That'd be like a bigger summer film because he's more of a marketable guy.
And the budget would go up because it's him.
Budget would go up because of his salary. They'd expect more of a return, but they would get more of a return because he's like fresh off Barbie. Like that's a big draw.
Fresh off an Oscar nomination for Barbie.
Quite literally. So that's like super kudos. That movie would be bigger than it currently is slated to be. But that's okay. Invisible Man was like $8 million for budget. That's like nothing. That's why it was such a profitable film. I mean, in ways, Invisible Man was more profitable than like a Marvel film by metrics of how much it made versus what it cost.
Yeah, if you do the math, it made a huge profit.
It made like 100 times its freaking budget. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane.
But hopefully this Wolfman does the same thing. I really think it will. I think if it costs anywhere near what the old, even if it costs double Invisible Man, it's still gonna make like 10, 20 times profit.
And these January horror movies always make bank.
They do.
At least to some degree. No matter how terrible they are, like I think Night Swim, people have, I haven't seen it yet, but people keep saying it's one of the worst movies of the year. I'm pretty sure that movie made a decent amount of money. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm pretty sure the only Blumhouse movie to ever lose money was Exorcist Believer, but that's because they paid an absurd amount of money for the rights.
Exactly, which is against Blumhouse's motto of, let's just find some pocket change and make an entire horror film and make $100 million.
Yeah.
$100 million, by the way, I think I mentioned this last episode, but The Invisible Man it was one of those films like Bloodshot and Onward that get tanked by COVID. Mm-hmm. It made $100 million before COVID wrecked its run. I predict it would have made like between $200 and $300 million. That movie was on the rise when COVID shut down theaters. So I think it would have made easily double what it made, potentially more. So if anything, that would have motivated studios, in a non-COVID world, that would have motivated studios to get on this faster, to get the next one out faster. So, but hey, we still got it. It still obviously made tons and tons of money regardless, and
now, of course,
it was a huge hit.
This one is going to be having a higher budget because the monster is not being played by the camera. But
no, it's being played by our favorite actor's computer-generated imagery. So
is it going to be CGI? Do you think it's going to be CGI?
I mean, there's definitely makeup involved. I mean, it's
obviously there's going to be some CG in there.
Because you can't have a dude in makeup run through buildings and run over a wall comfortably. Wires can only go so far.
I mean, it's 2024. There's going to be CG in there somewhere, even if it's minimal.
I mean, depending on shots and stunt work, it's cheaper for practical sometimes. It's cheaper for CG sometimes. They're going to do what looks and feels best.
Or it could be like Romulus, where it's a mix of the two and it looks awesome.
Haven't seen it yet. I want to on digital. I think I'm going to wait.
It's good. It's good.
I hear really good things. But all right. The other aspect of the Wolfman, it's the elephant in the room. The official logo and poster has been revealed.
I want to talk about the poster.
At the recent Halloween Horror Nights. And with that, the performer standing in front of it in a costume of what is intended to be the monster's design in the film. So, we'll sit on that for a second. What are your thoughts on the poster?
I think it reminds me a lot of the Invisible Man poster, where it's one of the other characters kind of reacting. Mm-hmm. Only instead of, you don't have the black half, where of course that's where the Invisible Man's standing, because he could be anywhere at any time. This is obviously they're reacting to the Wolfman in front of them. It reminded me a lot of that.
Yeah. It's one of those posters where on its own it doesn't mean much. It looks like every other poster. But after you see the trailer, you understand, oh, that's the premise. That's her father. That's the one person who's supposed to protect his daughter is the greatest threat, and that's an incredible premise, incredible way to adapt the Wolfman story that I don't think we've seen before, not as its own movie anyway. So
I think I've seen it. I mean, it's kind of come up, not necessarily with the kids, but I've never seen it. There's this movie called Bad Moon from the '90s where the premise is that he's a werewolf and he moves in with his sister and her daughter or her son or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently it kind of plays with that a little bit. I've never seen it. I've just heard of it.
Understandable.
So are we going to be talking before we jump into the design thing? Are we going to be talking about the synopsis they released for it?
Do you have it? I didn't write it down.
Here, let me find it. I know it exists, but let's start talking about the design first.
Okay, all right, I can do that. So before I say what I'm about to say, I want to be crystal clear. I have faith that this movie is going to be exceptional. I trust Lee Winnell. I trust Christopher Abbott. I am happily trusting the process on this. It is one of my most anticipated movies of the year, if not the. However, if this is what he will look like as portrayed by the stunt performer in front of that poster when it was revealed, within the context of the movie, because again, it might not, they might change it, it might be one stage of the evolution, whatever. If this is what the werewolf design will look like in the film, this might go down in Universal's 100-year-long history as the worst werewolf design we've seen on screen. It looks like a 70-year-old crack addict with pure white hair, no fur at all, and what appears to be a massive receding hairline, the least intimidating possible hairline. I might also add that his clothes are relatively intact and don't look shredded out of in the slightest, evoking not an untamed wild beast being set free, but a homeless man trying to scam you out of some crack money, or gas money. He'll just call it gas money.
He looks like a wrong turn character.
Yes, it is arguably the worst design for a werewolf that Universal's ever made. One of the worst Universal monster designs, which ties into this main title topic that we'll get to later.
Yeah.
But it is easily, like, if not the second or third worst Universal monster design ever, if this is what it is. Now, again, I feel like there's so many asterisks on this. This is just the initial thing, the initial concept. This may definitely change over the course of the story. Obviously, he's going to change into this over the course of the story, so, a lot more can happen. I predict that in the last, 20 minutes or so, he's full werewolf, and it'll be something that isn't marketed because it's so freaking cool.
Yes, that's one of the things I'm thinking.
That's my prediction, is that this is just like this is the initial what it looks like, but he'll get his final form, and it'll be glorious. But all we have to work off of is this horrible, and what's the word? Horrible design for the wolf. So, I hate everything about it.
Horrible, awful, very bad.
Yes, very bad, no good werewolf design.
Yeah. Here's where I get with this thing, is that I'm not seeing anything official from Universal saying this is it. And so my bullshit sensor is kind of going off because it's all just random people on Twitter saying, trust me, bro, this is totally what the design is going to be.
Well, let me ask you this. If it's not it, why did Universal do this? And why have they not released anything else except this?
Well, Universal didn't release it, though. It's all random pictures from random sources.
No, this is official. It's because, so that image, that Twitter video of the dude standing, that revealed the poster before the poster was officially revealed. So that's official as official gets. That's not some dude dressed up in Halloween makeup running around, not part of Universal or anything.
But the other thing is that there's so much more. Also, there's two different versions of it. I don't know if you've seen them.
There's the one I see where he's not dancing, but kind of posing and being kind of scary, running around.
There's one where it's a picture of him standing in front of the poster, and which apparently was out of Orlando. And then there's another one which is apparently video from the ride that this is part of.
So they're not the same?
They look similar in design, but they look distinctly different.
Really? I did not notice. I probably saw the photos and video in the same post
I haven't looked at them in a week, but they looked different. They didn't look exactly the same. Now, it could be because it's different stunt performers in the makeup.
Well, let's say it is. Let's go with that. Let's say it's one in Orlando, one in California. I don't know where.
Yeah, Hollywood, I think, is where the other one was supposed to be.
Then if that's true, that means Universal definitely planned this as a marketing thing and put them in two different places at once and said, here's our makeup, here's our design, this is the design we're going with. That further cements that this is the design they're going to keep marketing. So if they did the same thing twice at the same time in two different places of the country. So, I don't know.
But I think there's a couple of different things it could be. It could be a stage in the transformation. It could be the werewolf that bites him, and that's why he's all old and kind of haggard looking.
I don't think so because if you look at the trailer, the only
Yeah,
part of the trailer that shows werewolf is that hand slamming down, and that looks a lot like that old decrepit hand.
it does look a little bit like the hand. Yeah,
So
it's hard to tell from the little glimpse we get, but yeah, it does look a lot like that hand. It's just weird. I'm not gonna write off the movie because of it.
no, of course not.
There's so much. I mean, we don't have context for it yet. Is the problem? And I'm
That's
seeing
exactly it. Yeah.
and I'm seeing so many people like making shit up about like, oh, I think they're going to make it into he just has like a weird form of rabies and he's not actually a werewolf, whereas the description in the synopsis says there's going to be a werewolf. So I don't know where you're getting this bullshit from.
So, like, regardless of story, you can write in or not write in whether he has rabies. The design is still unrelated. You can make whatever design you want. It's a fictional beast.
But, I
It's
mean,
not a real thing.
I think it's going to be a stage in the transformation. That's what I think it's going to be.
Yes, I believe so. In fact, I will even go so far as to say the bulk of the movie, him being a werewolf, the bulk of his time as a werewolf might even be a design like this. But I still think there's that. I think it's 20 minutes. I'm imagining a runtime. I think it's the last section, most of the last act before they probably kill him or whatever, is going to be him as awesome werewolf. And I'm jazzed. Because if anything, I can crap on the design all day long, but now I'm kind of excited to see if they do what makes the most sense and do that. Because now I'll be going to this movie and being like, okay, I've seen literally 0% of the final design. This is what I'm here to see. This is why I got my ticket. This is why I set my day off. Thursday night premiere. This is what I'm here for. I'm jazzed for it. So that's exciting to me, that like prospect. I mean, how many monster movies do you see? Not to go off on this too long, but like how many monster movies do you see where you don't know what the monster is going to look like from posters or trailers or anything? They give you something, but you're pretty sure it's going to be something even better than that. That's cool. I've never been in that position. I can't think of one anyway.
Yeah, and then you've got Last Voyage of the Demeter, which is here's Dracula on the poster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like it's like a paradox because like how do you make a movie with surprises and twists and stuff, but you need to market it to as many people to make the most money, so you have to pick the best parts and put them in the posters and trailers to get butts and seats. That's always a guessing game. Like Marvel can play that really well because they have like a built-in fan base. They know they're going to see the next movie. They don't have to market all of the third act, you know. Endgame made over $2 billion and they didn't show anything from the second half of the movie.
Yeah,
So,
and sometimes they make fake Lego sets to throw you off.
yeah, right. But like Marvel can get away with that. Blumhouse can't. Like they're a name and a brand, but they don't have that level of fan base. It's not one big story.
Yeah.
They have to sell each movie on their own. So I understand the picking and choosing. Again, I think we're both right on this. I think the main theory that's prevailing is that this is a stage, probably the most time that he's going to spend as the werewolf is going to be as this like old man looking thing. And
It's going to be like
one...
it could be like the midsection of the movie is going to be maybe this.
Right, and that's where it causes the most like drama and terror and stuff. And that is the part they chose. Okay, we'll put this in the posters and trailers to market so people will think it's a, you know, they'll see a monster. They're like, I like monster movies, let's go see it. So they'll have seen it regardless, no matter what the design looks like. But they're also holding just that one trump card close to their chest of like, this is what the werewolf's actually going to be, and it's going to be so fun.
Because I also remember with the Invisible Man, they didn't tell you what the Invisible Man was going to be like in it at all. Like, I mean, I remember there was an interview where they asked Lee Winnell about it, and he played cagey about it. Now, I had been spoiled about the invisibility suit thing because there was like a casting sheet that came out. And it said, oh, he made a fortune making an invisibility suit for the United States government or some shit like that. And I'm like, oh, they're going there?
Yeah, exactly.
But I think at worst what this movie will be is it will be, even if there is no final wolf like we're talking about, it will be a solid movie with a weak design.
Yes, and I think that's...
Kind of like what the Child's Play remake was, where the movie was good, but the Chucky was really weird looking. I'm like, why'd you do that?
Yeah, exactly. And again, I really think that if that doesn't happen, if our amazing fan theory of I think there's a better design at the end doesn't happen, I think that's a big blunder. I think that is a massive misstep on their part, and they really should have rectified that. But regardless, I'm really excited for it no matter what. They could have put the Wolfman in a tutu, and I'd still be seeing it on opening day. Like, I stand by that.
Yeah, but does this Wolfman have nards? That's the real question.
Ooh, we got to answer that question promptly. But all right. With all that down, we are going to get into...
Oh, I got the synopsis, remember?
Oh, my apologies. That was so long ago. I feel like that was an hour ago. Yes. What's the synopsis as written by Universal?
Okay, so it says Christopher Abbott stars as Blake, so he's not Larry. A
No
San
last name either.
Francisco, a San Francisco husband and father, so Invisible Man connection,
Ooh.
who inherits his remote childhood home in rural Oregon after his own father vanishes and is presumed dead. With his marriage to his high-powered wife Charlotte fraying, Blake persuades Charlotte to take a break from the city and visit the property with their young daughter Ginger. But as the family, this is Blumhouse's synopsis, not Universal. But as the family approaches the farmhouse in the dead of night, they're attacked by an unseen animal and in a desperate escape, barricade themselves inside the home as the creature prowls the perimeter. As the night stretches on, however, Blake begins to behave strangely, transforming into something unrecognizable, and Charlotte will be forced to decide whether the terror within their house is more lethal than the danger without. So I think that gives away a huge thing.
Yes, that is an expanded version of the synopsis that we've kind of known about for the past like 4 or 5 months, where it's the dad. Because CinemaCon in like summer revealed a little bit of footage to people that went, and people describe footage. And it's usually like everyone online is always like, oh, what Marvel movies did they describe? And I'm looking for that too. But this was also there, and I'm like, a little bit more about that. So yeah, they described that a little bit, where the premise was the father getting turned and trying to protect his family from now himself. And that's going to be a really fun time. The most interesting part to me was something I didn't even pick up. You made a passing comment at the start of that description. It's in San Francisco, and you went Invisible Man connection. That made me think that whole speech where it's like, oh shit, why else would they have put it also in the same place as that, if not to do that? I think they're going to do that thing where, and they're playing it nice and coy, there'll be like one news article in the background of one shot about Adrian Griffin. There's going to be something. It's not going to be Prodigium. There's not going to be fucking Elizabeth Moss showing up trying to kill the Wolfman in an invisible suit. I think that'd be the worst possible ending, because it's not time for that
That would
yet.
be... Oh, she shows up and goes, Aloha.
Aloha, yeah. A reference to last episode. My God, viewers, please watch the unmade Universal Monster movies.
And then he gives her the finger.
Yeah. I put the last page of that script just in there. I don't care if Universal sues me. But commentary and criticism purposes, it's fine. But yeah, no, so I really think San Francisco ties into that, or eventually it will. I think potentially Lee Winnell / Blumhouse, if they keep doing this, I think they'll keep doing more Universal Monsters. They're going to do like 4 or 5 or 6 more, maybe not that many, and then make whatever their interpretation of a house movie is. And maybe that'll be it. Maybe that'll be the end of it. I don't know.
And meanwhile, mainline Universal is going to make like 6 more quasi-Dracula movies.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. When you give creators freedom to choose any monster, you just keep freaking choosing Dracula and nothing else, huh? So, whatever. But all right. Well, with that down, unless you have more to add to the...
Well, I had one more thing about the synopsis.
Please. I don't want to hold you back.
They mentioned the fact that Blake's father is missing, presumed dead. You think they're going to do the same twist from Wolfman 2010?
Missing, presumed dead... What was the twist where he was missing? It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
His dad was the Wolfman.
Oh, that specific twist? No, definitely not.
You don't think his missing father in this new one is going to be the werewolf that bites him?
No, because that's the only interpretation of the Wolfman in Universal's canon that's done that. So you would literally be remaking arguably the biggest, most significant twist from the remake and no other version of the Wolfman. And I don't think Lee Winnell desires to do that at all. Also, not for nothing, but the premise you illustrated where it's the father protecting his family, his dad's not relevant at all to that story. I mean, at least in the Wolfman, whether it's the 1940s movie or the 2010 remake, his dad was highly relevant to the story. He was a supporting character in both. So making him the Wolfman, I think, was 2010 improving on 1941's Wolfman. That's an aspect that did it better. That would do it so much worse in this premise, in this context, because it's just completely out of nowhere. I don't think it's relevant.
It would be pretty cool if there's a scene where he finds like the other Wolfman's nest in the woods, and like his dad's like corpses in there. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I don't know. It depends on how the movie starts. Like maybe if he moves into his dad's old cabin, maybe it killed his whole family. I don't know. Whatever. But
it's his old family home in the Oregon woods, so I mean, I got alarm bells going off, just saying. And also, I got a couple other things. I like that it seems to be taking place over like one night.
Yes,
but
love movies like that.
But going by the trailer, at least, I think it's more going to be like they get there at night, he gets attacked, and then there's some scenes during the next day, and then the bulk of it is going to be the next night where shit hits the fan.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love movies that contain themselves to realistic restrictions, because this would be a one-night affair. It wouldn't be over multiple. I just saw, what the hell was it, 3:10 to Yuma, where they captured the Russell Crowe's character. It's a Prodigium reference.
They captured Jekyll.
Yeah, yeah, and they're like, oh, we're taking him for the 3:10 to Yuma. It's like a bad, like a prison place. 2 days from now. So it's like, oh, okay. In any realistic context, it'd be like today or tomorrow. But because you wrote a script that takes place over 2 days, you're like, oh, the train leaves in 2 days. It's like, that's how you structured it.
It's because it's a Western movie and it takes fucking forever to get anywhere on a horse.
That's true. They got a horse all the way across the desert to get there, so that's fair.
That's
but yeah, no. So I like how it is a great movie. I like how so far it's structured so that it's one night. That's a really good thing. So it's one really fun. It reminds me of it's not to reference other unrelated movies just like 3:10 to Yuma, but like John Wick's trilogy, the first three before the fourth one, is all one weekend. It's like a really bad weekend for one guy. So I love viewing it that way. But yeah, no, so I'm over the moon excited about this stupid movie.
And okay, I have one stupid joke I have to make.
Please.
I wonder if his full name is going to be Blake Lawrence Talbot. They're going to pull a Penny Dreadful.
I mentioned 10, 15 minutes ago, like, oh, there's no last name when you said Blake. I was referencing the fact that he's not Lawrence nor Talbot. Like, at least Penny Dreadful had him be Ethan Lawrence Talbot. You know what I mean?
That was so funny that they did that.
When they revealed that name, I was like, wow, that's a Marvel-style twist for something that only fans from ancient werewolf movies would get. So, like, 70-year-olds plus.
It has real Robin John Blake energy from Dark Knight Rises.
Absolutely. Except most people know and, care about who Robin is, whereas Lawrence Talbot is an icon to people who like 40s movies. And again, you and I being in our 20s and 30s is super the exception to the rule with Universal Monsters.
Oh, yeah.
So, but yeah, it is what it is.
But who knows? Maybe it'll become a thing again with these new movies.
I want that more than anything.
Yes.
Dude, don't even get me started on House of Reboots, man. I want House of Reboots.
They're big enough. They're making the whole ass theme park out of it.
They are. And if you count the Blumhouse saga as a series, they've had one success rate. Wildly successful. Done. Precedent is set. But yeah. At long last, this is the best and worst versions of the Universal monsters. This is, of course, regardless of studio, but they do have to be from a film that is either adapting a classic monster character or at least loosely inspired by them. So, off the top, I will clarify that we are not including TV shows or else multiple characters from 1997's House of Frankenstein to be on this list, in the worst sections over and over again. But we'll do some honorable mentions.
We'd have Penny Dreadful in the best sections.
Yeah, we'll mention them. Like, hey, side note, it's not a movie, but Penny Dreadful version of this is great. Whatever.
Yeah.
But we did strictly movies. We're doing the best interpretation and why, and the worst interpretation and why. And I threw a bonus third category, and this is just for myself, but you can do it too. Visually the coolest.
I did visually the coolest, and a couple of them, two of them, I changed it out to a spotlight category for some more obscure ones.
Sure. Okay. Cool. That's understandable.
And I played fast and loose a little bit with best. I decided to pick ones I really liked that aren't necessarily the absolute best, because I would just be repetitive, going, "Well, I really like this original movie. I really like this original movie." Blah blah blah. So I decided to make it a little more interesting and diverse.
Exactly. And like I mentioned, they don't have to be Universal's produced, but they have to be about the Universal monsters in some sense. So like Monster Squad would count. LXG, some characters might count, whatever. But as long as it's something associated with the classic monsters, it's fair game. And it's got to be theatrical. It's got to be a movie. It can't be a TV show. Just
I almost included an LXG character, but I swapped it for something else.
I have LXG mentioned at least once. That is all I will say.
I think I know which one it is.
I can't wait to get there. But all right, so I'm going to list them. I was just going to say, I'm going to list the characters. Then, honestly, it'd be cool if we took turns just picking what characters to talk about. So, like, I'll list them all, and then you can just choose the first one we go with. So, we have pre-agreed upon Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, the Mummy, Creature of the Black Lagoon, Invisible Man, Hunchback and Notre Dame, Phantom of the Opera. We talked about Jekyll, but there's not that many cinematic interpretations that are notable, so we skipped them.
There's a lot of them. I just I haven't seen enough of them to really genuinely pick a worst.
That's what
Because
I'm kind of about,
because I've seen two or three of them. I've seen the silent one maybe once. I've seen the 1931 one, which is really good, and I've seen the 1941 version, which is almost a shot-for-shot remake.
Well, it's kind of funny. I only started this show because I'm passionate about the Universal monsters. I'm passionate about the short story about Jekyll and Hyde. I do not like, I think, any of his cinematic adaptations. I don't think I regard a single, like, I love Van Helsing, but I don't love it because of its interpretation of Dr. Jekyll.
Why the fuck is even Jekyll in that movie? I don't get it.
He was doing the Hunchback's job. He was in the freaking Notre Dame. Whatever. It's not important.
I mean, the Hunchback shouldn't be a murdering asshole.
No, that's probably why they changed it to Jekyll. I assume it was Hunchback in an earlier draft. But
Well,
regardless,
there is a behind the scenes thing where Stephen Summers is like, he's describing the scene where Jekyll dies, but he calls it a werewolf. So I'm like, did he script a different version of this where it was just a generic werewolf, another one?
interesting. I wonder, because there was a big mix-up going on with that Jekyll character anyway. But regardless, we're tangenting like we always do.
We gotta that we'll save that for a London assignment episode.
Exactly, which we will do. So there's 8 that we're choosing from today. Basically, the 5 or 6 biggest ones. We threw Hunchback and Phantom in there for fun. So, which one do you want to start with?
You know what? I'm going to start with Phantom because it's at the bottom of my list, and I have a absolute dinger of one that we get to talk about for worst. So let's do Phantom.
All right. Great. So let's do it like this. Like, take turns with best, take turns with worst, take turns with the third category. So,
Okay.
well, you picked it, so I guess I'll start. I think the best Phantom of the Opera interpretation across all of cinema, probably Claude Rains' interpretation of the character. I really like the Technicolor version. I don't think it's like one of the best Universal Monsters movies, but it's so much better than at least half of the ones produced. I think it's really strong. It was nominated for Oscars. It's one of the only Universal Monster movies to be in the Oscars categories. I really appreciate his interpretation because I like quite a bit the interpretation from the Lon Chaney Sr. version, but I think, and again, this is technical limitations, this is makeup limitations, you see him emotionally express himself, not just with like dialogue, which he does, but the face, the visual acting from that under the mask is just, there's something about that character that makes you invested, that makes you actually follow him to an extent. I haven't seen that movie in many, many years, but I can recall certain moments or certain emotions that he felt because of that performance and that interpretation. So I think Claude Rains is probably the best on-screen Phantom in memory.
I think he is really, really good in a movie that is very padded.
Yeah.
And has far too many just comedy scenes in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an okay movie, but man, did they because Universal, I guess, was putting the A budget on this one and shooting it in color. Boy, did they water down the horror.
Yeah.
It's an okay movie. I used to watch it when I was a kid. I have the Blu-ray. It's not bad. Mm-hmm. The commentary was interesting. Did you know they did a quasi-sequel to it?
Yes, I heard about it. Climax?
Yes, and they couldn't get Claude Rains back, so they went, here, we're going to rewrite it, make it about different characters. We're going to stick Boris Karloff in there because we have him under contract briefly.
I was confused because what do you do with a sequel? Do you just, retcon it? Didn't he die?
Yeah, the whole ass opera house falls on him at the end.
The whole fucking opera house. I mean, I'm mixing it up with the other one because
the cop shoots and then goes. My best, I'm actually going to go the opposite. I'm going to say Lon Chaney in the 1925 movie. It is visually impressive for a silent movie. It's the closest version to the book that has ever been adapted, I'm pretty sure. And I think his performance is amazing. The makeup is really cool. It looks like the description from the book where he has a skull-like face. The only thing the pacing is a little off in some places. And the other big thing is that they reshot the ending. The whole angry mob thing was a reshoot. It was originally going to end more like the book where he actually lets her go and then he dies of sadness or whatever. But I guess the test audience didn't like that, so they changed.
Why on earth wouldn't they like that? They
changed it to a big angry mob, and apparently Chaney was so upset that he he left Universal after that and went to work for MGM.
I think it's so funny because the big angry mob running the monster out of town, isn't that like, I'm not gonna say it's the first one, but isn't that like one of the first ones to do that in Universal's canon?
It's the second one. The first one was Hunchback.
It wasn't even the first one, and it was in 1925. It's not early
But-
enough. It needs to be earlier.
But the
Wow.
but that in that case, that's not really the Universal trip because that's in the book Hunchback, where they lay
Yeah, I
siege
guess
to
so.
Notre Dame.
I guess so. They're following that. But all right. Well, that's a great pick for best. I will not divulge if I have him on my list or not in any category. I will just say that my worst interpretation of this character, and this is odd that they were starting out with Phantom because I wanted to say this towards the end, because this might be cheating because this is the only one of his 3 identities. But the villain from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, one of the worst series of twists a movie could ever do. This character
my God.
merged Phantom of the Opera with M from James Bond with Sherlock's villain Moriarty. It literally disappoints all 3 characters. It does nothing from any of them. It literally, the M-ness is him just being in a room talking to people about doing a mission. That's it.
And he has like
The-
a Batman cape.
Yep, the Phantomness is him wearing a mask on occasion.
It's him
And then-
wearing a mask with like a tiny like stuck on makeup thing on him.
Yeah, it's adorable. And then the Moriarty thing is like 80% of his character, and even that is like, if you count it as a Moriarty adaptation, it is easily worse than most of them.
And they don't even reveal he's Moriarty until like 3 minutes from the end.
It's a worse Moriarty than the Sherlock Holmes 2. It's a worse Moriarty than the Sherlock TV show. It's just horrible. And perhaps the worst of those 3 characters it merges is the Phantom, because it's the least like that of any of the 3 that it's trying to be. It is just a dude wearing a mask, and therefore he's called the Phantom. And it's horrible. We didn't do a 4th category for worst visually least coolest. He might be in there if I were to pick one.
Oh, if I did, my worst would be in there.
Yeah, right. But all right. Well,
You want me to do
what
my
is-
worst?
Yeah, what's your worst Fan of the Opera interpretation?
So okay, this is under worst. It's directed by a legendary icon of horror, of Italian horror, Dario Argento from 1998. Let me walk you through what this movie is. I haven't seen this movie in like 20 years, but it's like burned into my brain. It starts off with baby Phantom getting thrown off a bridge like it's fucking Batman Returns. He floats into the sewers, gets raised by what are implied to be telepathic rats. He also develops telepathy. He's not disfigured, it's just Julian Sands looking normal. And so it's him like telepathic talking to Christine, and he takes her back to, who's played by Argento's daughter, who rather weirdly is like naked in all of his movies that she's in. So he takes her back, he's handsome ass Julian Sands, takes her back to his lair, they bang, and then he leaves the room, and she goes and she finds him lounging with his rats, crawling all over him, and he starts to unbuckle his pants, and that's why she starts to hate the Phantom. So it's a telepathic dude who was raised by rats, who also has sex with rats, apparently.
Oh man, I don't even know where to start with that one. Stop saying all these weird things.
And it just gets so weird as it goes along. Like, before he even does the dropping the chandelier thing, he threatens Carlotta by scratching her boobs. Argento was like, he made great movies in the 70s and 80s. At some point in the 90s, he just lost his fucking mind. And at one point, he said he wanted to make gothic horror from here on out. And I appreciate the passion, but man, your gothic horror movies suck.
That is quite the worst pick. Damn, had I seen that film, I may have. No, I think LXG might be as a character interpretation. I don't know, but that's a really rough pick. Traditional Phantom, worst probably. I will do the 3rd bonus category here, which is visually the coolest design. And it is one that you have already mentioned. I think the 1925 Lon Chaney Phantom is visually the coolest. I do not have him as the best. I think I mentioned why. The makeup doesn't really let him express himself. Lon Chaney Sr. is, because he's a silent film actor, he has to be very visual with his body language and stuff.
Yeah.
But that's all you get from the Phantom by proxy, as a result. So I think in comparison to later versions, pretty much every other later version of the Phantom of the Opera, you hear him, he does things, he can act, he can emote visually. And not that Lon Chaney Jr. can't, Sr. can't. He absolutely can. But I mixed it up for the first time. But he absolutely can, given the limitations of the medium at the time. But given those limitations, that kind of knocks it down for me. So it's here where it belongs in visually the coolest because damn, that makeup, man. That makeup. I mean, so many versions of Phantom have great makeup, and this is no exception. I regard this one as the best 100 years later. It is so strong, it holds up.
I can't argue with that. So my third you want to move on to my third category?
Yeah, please. Absolutely.
This is one of the categories where I switched out the visual one for the spotlight, and I'm going to talk about Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself, in Phantom of the Opera in 1989. This is a movie which sounds like a very bad idea on paper because it sounds like he's just going to be Freddy in it. But the movie weirdly kind of works because it does have, like, it is an 80s horror movie, so it is much more brutal and gory and has a ton of kills in it. But there's so many cool things he does in here, and his performance is really interesting. They take, because it's always been like a theme in Phantom, the usage of the Faust opera.
Mm-hmm.
And so they make it literal, where he unwittingly makes a deal with the devil so his music will live forever and people will love him for it. But then the devil touches him and says, yo, they'll love you, but only for your music. And his face is just this big bloody mess, and his mask isn't a mask. What he does is that he'll kill people and take bits and pieces of faces to recreate his face.
Okay.
It looks really cool. It actually works, and considering this is from, like, the guy who ran Cannon Films in the 80s, but from his company that he went to after he got kicked out of there, which made, like, the 1990 Captain America, it's shockingly good. And it also has this weird time travel plot where Christine gets knocked out in the modern day and wakes up in the past. And it kind of works, too. It's weird, but it's worth checking out.
It certainly sounds it for how just out of left field it sounds.
Yeah. It's a very
right.
different interpretation, but I think it's fun to watch.
Sure. I will definitely note that down. As we keep doing this show, every single film we mention, we're just going to watch and review at some point.
Yeah, especially that 1998 movie.
I'm going to pick the next category, and since you started really obscure, I'm going to go right for the throat. I'm going to go for the creme de la creme. Let's talk about Dracula, man. Let's do it.
You said go for the throat with Dracula.
I did. I didn't even mean to do that, but I'm so glad I did. And since I'm picking the category, why don't you start us off with the best interpretation of Dracula, which is admittedly a very high bar.
A very high bar. Okay, so I quasi-cheated on this one, and I picked one that's a little off the beaten path. I picked Klaus Kinski's Dracula from the 1979 Nosferatu. A really good remake. It restores the original character name, so this technically is a Dracula. And the makeup's really good. And the way he plays Dracula is interesting because he's absolutely miserable, it seems like, as a vampire. Like, he's very kind of like... He's kind of descended into kind of like this ennui, and he doesn't like his condition, but he still goes around killing people for their blood anyways. And it combines that with... And it emphasizes the plague aspect from the original Nosferatu, where you see a lot more of, like, people dying and people going crazy because people are dying from the plague. And I just really, really like this movie. It's visually very cool. Herzog directs the shit out of it. And Kinski is just this undeniable presence in the role.
Yep. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm kind of biting my tongue over here because my best is Nosferatu, the classic.
I love that movie too, man.
So I'm even more off the beaten path because this one does not have proper character names. It is, in fact, a knockoff. But the fact that Bram Stoker sued it and won means that it was, in fact, a Dracula film in the
His
first place.
Widow.
So I think it is. Exactly, The Widow, yeah. So Nosferatu is... It was really hard for me to choose because I think Dracula and Sherlock Holmes, if I'm wrong, are the two most adapted literary characters in movies.
They are.
They're 1 and 2 in some order. It doesn't matter. It keeps changing every year because they keep making more of them. So that was really hard for me. So I really sat down and went through like every Dracula film I've seen, every single one. I'm like, wow, I love this interpretation. Wow, I love that interpretation. But I think the one that sticks with me the most is one of the first ones I ever watched, and one that everything else kind of takes from. I think it's Nosferatu. I think that
it's the earliest still existing one.
The earliest still existing one, the one that's not lost. It is so impactful, very influential. Sunlight is lethal to vampires because of that film and not before. Yep. It's one of the most influential horror films ever made in many respects. But I think what stands apart from me as that book is, or that movie, I was going to say the book, is because Bram Stoker's book, Dracula, the book kind of flirts with the idea of being kind of a romance sometimes, but Dracula is a sinister, evil being. And so many versions of Dracula try and make it more of a romance, like he's all sexy and stuff. And Nosferatu has like none of that. It's just this sinister thing, right? But the problem is when a lot of Dracula adaptations come out and it's a sinister monster, they give it no character because it's just a monster. And Nosferatu is like the perfect balance of like, yeah, it's this demonic force that'll just drain your life, but it's also a tortured soul. Like it's this sinister character. I'm drawn, and the reason why I've seen parts of Nosferatu, the remake you're talking about, is one of the best ones. No, you're saying it's the best one. I've seen.
It's one of them.
I haven't seen the full film, but my issue with that is the reason why you like it, which is that you can see him kind of emote more like as a tragic character. To me, I go for more of the version like Willem Dafoe's version of Shadow of the Vampire.
That's awesome.
I love that movie so much. But
that's
his
my Discord photo. That's my Discord profile.
It is. I just noticed that right now. I love that movie so much because Willem Dafoe echoes the sinister being of the classic Nosferatu. Like he translates that perfectly. And given the context, it's an actor, quote actor, so it's a whole thing. But I just love that just evil vibe of Dracula.
I do.
It's echoed as well with Last Voyage, but he's not in enough of that film for me to kind of regard him amongst the other ones. Nosferatu, I think, is probably my favorite interpretation of cinematic Dracula ever.
I can't argue with that. That movie's great. I went with the remake because I have a whole bunch of them that are like A or S tier, and I figured I'll go with one that probably doesn't get talked about that much.
Sure, that's fair. I mean, look, it's the most, or one of the most adapted literary characters ever. So is Frankenstein, which is also on this list. So you have your just a murderous row of films that are the best ever, the worst ever, and tons of mid. So it's right in the middle there. So with that being said, what is your worst Dracula?
Oh, worst.
Yeah.
It's funny we did these two categories together because I gotta talk about another Dario Argento movie.
No way.
Basically, it's Dracula 3D.
Whoo!
That tells you everything you need to know right there.
Is that the one, if I may add in and interrupt you, is that the one where they're in space?
No, that's Dracula 3000.
My mistake. You can understand the confusion with the titles on that one.
I probably could have named that one, but I forgot about that movie till you mentioned it.
Anyway, go on.
With Coolio.
Yes, that's why. Oh, man.
Oh, God, that movie's coming back to me now. Maybe no, I'm not gonna change my answer at the last minute like a bitch.
Don't let me influence you.
But no, Dracula 3D. It's shot very flat. It's flat digital cinematography because it's 3D. The 3D effects, because I didn't see this in theaters or on like a 3D TV or anything. I just watched it like a regular movie. They're all very cheesy, very poorly done. There's a scene where Dracula, I shit you not, turns into like an 8-foot tall praying mantis and like goes down the hallway, and that's it.
I mean, that's...
And
I almost said that's from the book, but it absolutely isn't. The idea of it is in the book, maybe a little.
I don't remember that. I just
not the
listened to
mantis,
audible
but like
version.
he turns into things of nature.
Yeah, he turns into wolves. He turns into fog.
In the book, did he turn into that thing from Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, the big tall boy?
No, he turns into a regular, like a big, like a kind of big-ish bat, which they see sometimes lurking at the window. Once again, Argento's daughter is in this, and again, weirdly naked, but she's not in it as much. It's just not good. It's just bad. At the last minute, they try and throw in like the romantic angle with Mina. Literally, the last 10 minutes of the movie, they do this. And then he gets defeated. He turns into like a weird dust storm that looks like something out of The Mummy. And what kills it is the fact that Dracula is very well cast. He's played by Thomas Kretschmann, who was the ship captain in Peter Jackson's King Kong, among other things.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
he's really good in the movie. And Van Helsing is really good too. He's played by Rutger Hauer.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both just... There's one cool scene in the movie where there's like a group of guys in the room standing around the table going like, what are we going to do about Dracula? And he goes in, kills all of them, and it's awesome. And I'm like, where did this come from in this piece of shit? And then the movie goes back to being terrible.
Understandable.
And I don't think Argento has made a film since this one.
I wonder why not. Maybe it's because studios won't give him money for it.
And I love the guy. I love his old stuff because it's unlike anything else you've probably ever seen. And it's really effective. But this is just like, this and Phantom are like, man, you don't get to shit on the guy remaking your movie Suspiria because that's a way better. That remake is much better than anything you've made in like the last 30 years.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I couldn't not talk about this because it's like I get to put Argento on the list twice.
Exactly. Love your worst. Excellent pick. Never would have imagined it. My worst is I'm going to talk about what it almost was. I had this as my worst. I had Dracula versus Frankenstein's Dracula as the worst. With just
I've never seen that.
I've seen just the fight, if you can call it that, from that.
Isn't it like in the woods in the dark and you can't see shit?
Yes, it is very rough. It is not great.
I think I saw the James Rolfe video on it years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a problem. It is a crime, one could say. But before we started, I want to say like a couple days ago, I remembered a different interpretation of, in fact, Dracula that far and away cleared that. Adam Sandler in Hotel Transylvania. This might be controversial because this film was well received.
I've never seen any of them.
I hated this film so freaking much. I started to watch it one day. I got like 20 minutes in. I was like, this is not for me. And then like years later, Joaquin's like, I need you to watch a bunch of Adam Sandler movies. I was like, okay, it sounds fun. And so I picked this because I'm like, all right, let me just commit. I'm going to strap myself down and just watch it. And I did. And I regret having watched the whole thing. The reason I was really between this version and Dracula versus Frankenstein, the reason this is at the top, it wins by the rap battle in the third act. The rap
that happens.
The Dracula rap, which is a real thing in this film, it is like I just imagine Bram Stoker. Just imagine Bram Stoker just watching like, oh my god, my character is no longer copyrighted because it's been so long. This is what my character has become. This is where we are. It'd be like if like 100 years from now, like my favorite movie is The Matrix. Imagine if like Neo was just like shitting and pissing in a bucket in like a kid's movie, and he's going oopie doopie doo. Like that's the level of respect Dracula got treated for.
That might be better than Matrix Revolutions.
Better received. Yeah, no, this was a crime. I don't want to say I hate everything about it. I like the film's animation, fishing for compliments. But
well, I mean, it's a Genndy Tartakovsky movie, I think, so of course.
Jesus, yeah. But in terms of being an adaptation and interpretation of arguably my favorite literary character ever, I think he is my favorite book character ever. This is horrible. Just the worst. I couldn't think of worse. So yeah, that easily takes the cake. Takes the number one spot as the worst. But all right, here we go. Visually the coolest. Did you use this category or sub it out?
Yes, I did use this one. I picked Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mario Puzo's The Godfather. Sorry, I had to make that joke because Coppola does that all the time, and it's hilarious. This movie,
he does, yeah.
I have some issues with it as a movie, some issues with it as an adaptation. I do think it's a good movie, though, and visually, this movie is absolutely insane. Like, he went for it with all the production design and the in-camera effects, the different forms of Dracula. Like, you get werewolf Dracula, you get that cool bat monster Dracula, and Gary Oldman's performance is also really great in it. So, I mean, if you've seen the movie, you know why it's here.
I've seen the movie very long time ago. I was probably like 10 or 12. I vaguely remember, like, I know the storyline because it's so close to the book, but like I vaguely remember scenes from that movie. I mostly remember the scene where he's a big like 10-foot thing. He's just walking around. He's like in the bedroom. That was my whole thing from that.
Which is made hilarious if you watch the behind the scenes footage because there's scenes of Gary Oldman talking in his regular Gary Oldman voice in this big bat monster costume and arguing with Coppola about like his character motivation. And
out of context,
he goes like. He's like, but Keanu is something. And he's like, don't talk to me about Keanu, Gary.
Yeah, out of context, it's hilarious. In context, it's hilarious. But
in context, it's a cool costume. It's like, oh, hey, we could totally have done Man Bat in the 90s.
In terms of visuals, the makeup is stellar. It's next level. Visually the coolest. I know I'm going to get shit for this. I know it, but I don't pick things because I want people to like my picks.
Are you picking Van Helsing?
I am picking things solely on my actual opinion. Richard Roxburgh and Van Helsing is not the best version. It's not the best version of Dracula by a country mile. It is the coolest visual version. He's got this awesome like World War nun trench coat. He's got this like sick makeup, excellent. Like when he's walking around, you feel the strength and power and presence from that. I actually would have gone with Nosferatu again for visually the coolest, but he's too like plain and simple. It's because it's a limitation of the time. It's just black, white head. That's it. So like, it's interesting, but there's not enough.
Maybe the Eggers Nosferatu would slip into this category.
Yeah, potentially with the 8K cameras and stuff, but it's going to be like a square and black and white. Who cares? But like Richard Roxburgh, like just from a conceptual point of view, he's a freaking rock star. And it is so fun to watch just as a movie. But one of the reasons why is the costume design on that is just insanely fun. And just to see that character, he's the main villain of the movie. To see him in so much of the movie is just so interesting to me. So I love it every time. But yeah.
And they recycled it for the theme park, apparently.
Yeah, they sure did for quite a bit, and now he's back in there, which, hell yeah. It's almost Van Helsing's Dracula verbatim, which is hilarious.
I do think it's funny he ended up in the worst category of one of our previous, and now he's in visually cool on this one.
You're damn right. That sums up a lot of Stephen Sommers' career. Visually
Stephen
the coolest.
Sommers did not make LXG.
He did not. No, he did not. That is very true. But all right. Well, since you're picking now, what is your next monster that I'm going to start talking about?
Oh, boy. I'm going to pick the Invisible Man.
Hell yes. I have my best. And honestly, you can predict it without even giving it much thought at all, because I just cannot stop talking about Adrian Griffin from Lee Whannell's Invisible Man. This interpretation is menacing. It is fierce, but it is so grippingly character motivated. It is so much more interesting than all of the old Invisible Man movies combined. And I have a lot of respect for that first Claude Rains one, but it is very campy. It is very dated. It is of its time, which is fine. The effects are off the chain, but the effects in this one are off the chain too. Like,
yeah,
as a character, it is, in my mind, so far and away better than Universal's other interpretations. And then I started thinking about other non-Universal interpretations like Hollow Man. This is still country mile the best one in terms of a character, in terms of what he is and his motivations. So interesting to watch.
Okay, so I have to say, I also picked this for the best.
Yes. I was going to wonder if we had any mutuals on here.
I just didn't want to be like, part of me was like, I just didn't want to be harping on about the originals all the time, because I did this when we did the first episode. And I do love the original movie. It's a very special movie to me, but this is also really good too. And what I find kind of interesting about it is that, because if you read the book, right, the character doesn't really have any depth in the book at all. He is an asshole who becomes invisible and becomes a bigger asshole.
Yep.
Lee Whannell stayed very true to that concept in this movie.
He did. He did. And from the opening scene, you're like, how could he be more of an asshole? And then you see how.
And I mean, it's a great movie where like the Invisible Man character actually isn't in the movie that much. So much of the movie, his presence is just implied, but you feel the presence because the cinematography is so good.
Yes, and because they did such a good job establishing who he is and what he wants, when he visually isn't there, you know he's there. That adds to that. There's something so interesting about that I feel like other Invisible Man interpretations have not capitalized on, and it's so cool to see.
And the little bit you do get of the actor, he's really good, but he's really good in everything that I've seen him in.
Yeah, he's great. I've seen him in nothing else. I'm excited to see more of him.
Netflix. He was in Haunting of Hill House, and he was in Haunting of Bly Manor.
Okay.
He's really good in those.
With that down, we both did our bests, which is deservedly so. I'm going to start with my worst. I am actually really curious to hear your worst, but I'll start with mine. This absolutely counts. Lou Costello from Abbott and Costello Meet Invisible Man. This is the worst interpretation of the character.
I wouldn't even have thought of this.
No, I really sat down and thought, and I had like other picks in there. I was like, wow, this Invisible Woman is a terrible pick. But damn, man, that is one of those movies that is so not bad. It's pretty strong most of the way through, and the ending just tanks it. I remember watching that for the first time, and I was like, wow, okay, I'm ending with here with like, it's like a 7, maybe an 8. And then the last like 60, 90 seconds happens, and he becomes invisible, and it's like a whole series of cartoon gags and live action. I'm like, oh my god,
His legs are on backwards.
whatever good faith you had, you just pissed away. And I think I gave it like a 2 out of 10 because it left such a sour taste in my mouth. If I were to think about like the worst versions of the character, to me what that means is what character did the most damage, and far and away Lou Costello. So easily the worst. I don't like the actors' movies, the Costello duos. I don't like their stuff in general. Abbott Meets Frankenstein is the best of what they do, but what they do isn't very nice, to quote Wolverine. So
I love Meet Frankenstein. I think Invisible Man is okay. Like, it has some really good gags in it.
It's
The other
mostly
ones,
great.
the other ones, like, I saw Jekyll and Hyde when I was a kid. I didn't like it much then.
Yeah,
The Mummy is really bad.
it's very bad. But yeah,
And it's bad by Mummy movie standards.
So I, and we've been doing this on occasion, but I'm gonna just start here now. Is your pick Invisible Woman?
It was going to be. I almost did it, but I decided to pick something that I haven't talked about much. It's a John Carpenter movie called Memoirs of an Invisible Man, starring Chevy Chase.
I haven't seen this. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
It's the movie itself is kind of like a mediocre kind of like thriller. This weird Rube, he's at like this presentation at like this lab about like history or something. He's hungover and bored, so he goes to look for a place to lie down. And he asks for directions to the men's room from this guy sitting at a computer who knocks over his coffee, fucks up the computer, and that causes it to go all haywire, and the building gets turned partially invisible. And Chevy Chase gets turned partially invisible. And then the movie is him trying to escape from this government agent played by Sam Neill, who is giving a way better performance than this movie deserves. And it's a movie where Chevy Chase wanted to flex his acting ability and do different stuff, show some range. But the studio and everyone else involved wanted a comedy. And there was so much conflict that like multiple directors quit. And John Carpenter only took the job because he had gone on like a 4-year hiatus where like nothing was getting done. So he was like, okay, this will just be something to go on my resume. And it was the experience was so bad that like both Chevy Chase and Daryl Hannah were like hugely difficult to work with. And it was just a miserable experience to the point that he basically disowns this movie. And to give you an idea of the comedy in this movie, it is occasionally Chevy Chase will yell at people and it's supposed to be funny. And there's a scene where he catches a cab ride by like knocking a dude out and like puppeteering his arms and stuff and pretending that he's drunk. And so when he gets to the destination, he like pushes the guy out of the car, bends him over, and makes like puking noises to pretend that he's vomiting. The one thing this movie does well is, and Chevy Chase's performance is just, he's like half asleep through the whole thing. The one thing it does really cool is the effects are awesome, actually. Like they show him like eating, and it's done practically.
Ooh, interesting.
But then they also do things like where like half the movie it's just Chevy Chase sitting off to the side and we can see him but no one else can, which is lame.
Right, yeah.
It's just a lame, not very good movie.
To go on to the next category of visually the coolest, this was the most challenging for me to decide because how do you choose the most visually coolest guy for a guy you can't see? So for me, when I was trying to pick the absolute most interesting one, I went through them all, and in my mind, it's not necessarily a character, it's a scene. It's Claude Rains in the unmasking scene. The first time we see the Invisible Man on camera, right? And I think, because I really went through them, I thought about 2020s, because when she dumps the paint, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
I thought about even like Hollow Man's effects are really impressive for what they were. And the sequels to Invisible Man, I think Invisible Agent has great effects.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think, like, it's 1932, 35, somewhere around
33.
33. It's 1933, and literally that's like better rotoscoping or film like compositing than you see 100 years later. Like, this is because they had such limited technology. They were so smart in how they handled it, so it would look absolutely perfect, and it looks so good. It looks as good as movies today look. Like, it for what it was incredible. So every time I think of Invisible Man, like effects and stuff, I think of a lot of different movies, but I go back to this one, and I think visually the coolest has to be that movie for what it was, and especially that scene in the hotel. The first time on screen we've seen Invisible Man effects. So fun, so interesting, still jaw-dropping to this day.
Yes. I picked something, and this is one I picked because there's one specific effect in it that stood out to me, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, how the hell did they do that? And it's Hollow Man, which
Yeah.
is an okay movie. It's an alright movie. It's not great. It's like an okay kind of slasher movie. It's watchable.
Yep.
But, like, the thing is that, like, the CGI in the movie isn't... It's okay for 2000, but it hasn't aged very well, a lot of it. But there's one effect they do where they, like, pour the rubber over his face.
Yes.
And give it, like, eye holes and air holes. And through the whole movie, you can see to the back of his head. And I'm sitting here looking at this going, how did they do that?
Yes, it's unreal. It's crazy. Like, in a world where I wouldn't have picked Claude Rains, that's like one of the contention ones. I fully agree with you, by the way. It's like maybe a 7 out of 10 movie. It's a decent movie. It's okay. But the effects are crazy in that movie. They do not deserve to be that good, and they are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that specific effect. It's like, I wish it was a better movie because it's a Paul Verhoeven Invisible Man movie, which should be more awesome than it is.
Well, let me pass the reins off to you after I pick this film or this character. I think
Oh, boy.
we should do... Screw it. Let's do one of the biggest ones they have. Let's do The Mummy. What's your best interpretation of The Mummy?
I picked Boris Karloff as Imhotep in the 1932 Mummy because he's got really cool powers. He's a really interesting character, and Boris Karloff carries the shit out of that movie. He is so good.
So this almost happened with Nosferatu, but it was 2 different versions. This is the first time we overlap. I agree. Boris Karloff is the best interpretation of The Mummy. And it was weird to me because I thought about that too. I was like, is the best one the first one? And everything else is not as good like, in terms of a character and what he is. What, freaking Aminette from 2017 is better? No, it's him. It's freaking Boris Karloff. Like, all the sequels to that movie do not have a great character. We'll get there. All the reboots are either okay or just significantly worse. And he's the one that stands out to where it's like, wow, that's why you have a franchise. Like, that guy made that what it is. Without that charismatic performance, the franchise doesn't exist. I swear to God.
Yeah, it's just such an indelible performance, and like it shows you exactly why Boris Karloff was a star.
Yes.
Because imagine watching Frankenstein, where he's good but in a different way, then watching this and be like, oh, this guy's going to stick around.
Yes, and Boris Karloff's talent shines through in Frankenstein, but he gets a chance to showcase more of his acting talent in The Mummy. And oh man, this is why he gets a big paycheck. This is because he's freaking elevating the movie that he's in.
It's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like Boris Karloff getting to do his Dracula, because he's playing a much more sinister figure. Mm-hmm. And but he also brings a little bit of that humanity to it that he does with Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm. And we really only talked about the acting so far. In terms of a character, I think he's better too, because his motivation is way more interesting than the later sequels. His powers are more interesting than all the reboots. The reboots, freaking Arnold Vosloo's version has like every power, and somehow he gets defeated twice in a row by a normal guy with a gun and some yelling. But like, this version of the Mummy is actually genuinely interesting. He's got the heart attack powers. He's got the portal where he can see people all the time. Unlike Dracula the book, it is a bit of a romance. He is trying to get his queen, and that is part of the story. It's integrated well. It's not integrated as well in the sequels, but it's done absolutely the best here. I just love that version. I don't love the movie as like my favorite movie ever or anything like that, but I think that version of the Mummy stands true as my favorite version of it.
Yeah, it's just a really good movie.
Yeah, it's great. So, with that down, what's your worst?
Let's talk about piece of shit. I picked this one because this is one where there's plenty of bad Mummy movies that are all down in the fucking dirt. And I picked one that was disappointing because it had some good ideas. It's so weird because this is a movie I randomly found because I decided I was going to watch a bunch of horror movies in October one year. This was free on Prime. It's called Blood of the Mummy from 2018. I'm surprised they got away with this blatant fucking copyright infringement. The mummy and the reincarnated princess in this movie are called Karis and Ananka, which are Universal original names.
That's rough, man. That's rough.
And the one thing they do that's interesting is that the mummy kind of quasi isn't a bad guy in this one. Basically, what happens is that her parents are archaeologists. They get murdered in the tomb. You think it's by the mummy, but you later find out it's not. There was something else going on. And he basically follows her around through her life as her protector. Like, he kills her abusive aunt. She gets picked up by this guy who like tries to sexually assault her, and the mummy kills him. And the mummy just will just disappear with no trace. So it's like they think she's crazy, and then like the modern day set part of the movie is in taking place in an asylum. And it's an interesting idea, but the execution of this movie is just so bargain basement. There's like a purple filter over it too for some reason. And then like the scene where he kills the attempted rapist, he rips his arm off, and then the guy is a terrible actor, and the effect is terrible too. But the guy's a terrible actor, and he seems completely nonplussed by the loss of his arm. Tries to fight Karis and calls him a mum-ra motherfucker.
I have to ask, why did you watch this?
I was bored. I was trying to watch a bunch of horror movies for October, and I rolled the dice.
I guess you rolled a nat 1. Like, jeez.
And I almost picked something else, but it was one I hadn't seen in a very long time, and I didn't want to like. I almost went out of my way to watch it again, but I remembered like half of the movie was two guys in the room talking about what happened, and I'm like, no.
Understandable.
What is your worst?
That is tough. My worst, I guess I'm surprised you didn't pick it. It's Karis from every sequel to The Mummy. Like, it's easily the worst interpretation.
I picked the Karis.
You sure did. You picked one of them. But there's literally nothing to him. I can't criticize his character. There's no character. He's just a dude stuck in the Heisman Trophy position where he's just limping. He doesn't move. He doesn't
even make noises.
He walks at sub 1 mile an hour max speed, and the entire 4-movie sequel saga treats it like it's the most haunting, terrifying, like, how are we going to stop this guy? Why do you want to stop this guy? What's the point? He's never going to get you. And I like anybody with like half a brain cell could be like, oh, I could probably just like push this guy over and I'd win. Like, he does nothing. He's got no powers. He's got no, like, I don't remember if there's any mind control or anything. He doesn't do anything interesting like the Boris Karloff version does. He does all kinds of cool shit. He has a plan, he actually executes it. This dude just keeps coming back and limping for like 4 movies straight. Even Abbott and Costello, like they make fun of the version with the bandages with the Heisman Trophy post. Like, why not actually do the version that people like that's interesting? So it's just shocking to me. And then I watched, of course, well, I was just going to say, like, with the reboots, I could go into like Amunet. I don't actually hate Amunet from 2017's Mummy.
I like Amunet. It's just the movie is a piece of shit.
The movie's a piece of shit, but like Sofia Boutella is not the problem with that movie. If anything, she would be contending for visually the coolest. It's pretty good. The split eye thing is cool. Yeah. But like, oh my god, I'm blown away. That was, in terms of all the Universal Monsters sequels, that is like the biggest downgrade. Like, Dracula, yeah, I think Son of Dracula is a downgrade from Bela Lugosi's interpretation, whatever. But this is like 10 steps below. Like, and they just kept it for so long. So I was blown away how bad that was. But I haven't seen 2018's Blood of Your Mother's Hand of the Tomb, so I haven't.
You don't need to watch it. Yeah, but yeah, the thing with Karis in those movies is like, they'll ever so slightly edge towards doing something with him, and then they never do it. He'll turn on his masters for like 2 minutes at the end of the movie, and he never has his own agenda, really. He follows what the god of the cult says, and if the priests go against it because they're horny, he's going to turn against the priests.
Yeah, like all the villains with characters are like dudes in like robes and stuff doing rituals. Like, the Mummy isn't even a character. He's a tool. It's like a sword.
Like, you have Emperor Palpatine and a guy in a fez.
Yes, and John Carradine on occasion. What's your visually the coolest?
I picked one where it's one I've talked to you about before, but you haven't seen. I picked Christopher Lee as Karis from The Mummy 1959. This is a really cool... It's worth watching. It's basically what they did is they took bits and pieces of all 5 Mummy movies and went crunch into one big movie.
That's what I've heard.
It's really good. It's actually pretty damn good. This one is basically, they made it cool. He's very big. He's very intimidating. He like punches down a door in one of his scenes. And he also looks really cool because before you really get a good look at him in the movie, he the crate that he's in falls off the horse-drawn cart into a bog, and so he's like a mummy, but he's like sheathed in muck through the whole film. And Christopher Lee's performance, boom, so good. He doesn't have a line. He only has lines in the flashbacks, but he brings a lot of great physicality to the mummy. Love it.
I haven't seen the movie. I've seen the scene from that where they're in the house and there's like some kind of fight going on, but like I don't know if the house is burning down, but it's Peter Cushing fighting the mummy
Yes,
there.
Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, great double act in horror.
Yes, absolutely. And I was really impressed because he looks very similar to the Karras version, so immediately my brain is like, this is going to suck. He's a force to be reckoned with. You're absolutely right. He's zooming through the scene. He's genuinely intimidating. I felt like Peter Cushing could have actually been injured or died from that interpretation.
And he's
unlike
also
all the sequels.
And he's also has a limp in that movie because he injured himself during the expedition, so that puts him at more of a disadvantage. But no, one thing that's actually kind of fun about that scene is the mummy gets stabbed through with like a spear in that scene, or like a fire poker or whatever. Peter Cushing added that to the scene because they had already drawn up the poster, and the mummy had a hole in him. He's like, he's got a hole in him on the poster. He's got to get a hole in him in the movie, or people will be disappointed.
That's very funny. I need more actors like Peter Cushing to motivate storytellers to do better. Visually the coolest. Like I said, I thought about Aminet. I think
Tomb of
visually...
the Dragon Emperor.
Jet Li's Emperor from Mummy 3. Yes, it's the coolest one, Pyramid Head. Why don't you just shut your mouth for once in your stupid life, predicting all of my possible picks? Yeah, no, I picked this guy. This guy is visually the coolest. Every other version of the Mummy is just a dude who's like reincarnated, and he walks around and talks to people sometimes. Sometimes he doesn't talk at all, and he tries to strangle you, and he has a thing, and if you get the magic thing, he's going to stab you. He doesn't stab you. Blah, blah. This thing is awesome. It's like a genuine like comic book supervillain interpreted as a mummy. And for me, that's so visually much more interesting. One of the best parts, and one of the reasons I think the third Mummy is the best of the three, which nobody thinks, is it has the most visually happening. It's the color palette pops. The visual effects are genuinely good. And some aren't, but some are actually really impressive. I think that interpretation of the Mummy visually is the most to watch. It's the most going on. If you put any Mummy movie on in the background, this one will draw your attention more than any of them, and I stand by that. And yes, when he turns into a dragon, it's cartoony as hell and whatever, but the concept's cool. At least when he's using the elemental powers throughout the rest of the movie, I don't know. My eyes have something to do on screen. I'm in it. I'm invested. Just purely like when he telekinesis the wood top of the carriage and throws it. He throws his own face, man. He throws his own face.
I don't even know why he does that. He has all these powers, and he just goes...
It was just a split-second thing. Like, he's like, oh, shit, there's a guy there. Pop. It's fun. It's a fun time. I don't know. I really enjoyed that version. Just visually. It's not the best one.
I don't mind the Dragon Emperor character. I just don't care for the movie that much.
Understandable. I'm backwards on that. But yeah.
Oh, we well established in high quality content lore.
Yes, and this podcast lore.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. Well, I'll get that down out of the way. Damn, I was building up to it too. I was gonna mention different versions. You're just like, Jake, I know exactly what the fuck you just picked. So whatever. All right. Well, I picked the category of mummy. So who is our next dashing young lad?
Okay. The dashing young lad of the hour. I am going to pick the Wolfman.
Woo! I want to do this one next. All right. Well, I'll start with best. I'm just going to say it. This is a popular one amongst Wolfman fanatics. David from American Werewolf in London. In terms of being a character, I think he has the most to do. I think there's the most going on. It almost hit visually the coolest as well, just because of the transformation effects are legendary and iconic, but movies borrow from it all the time. But solely strictly talking about the character and what he is, oh my god, this is like easily the most like complex of them. He's torn between so many things. The only criticism I have with the movie in terms of like characters is I think the love interest doesn't have much to do, but at least it motivates him a little bit more. I think David is an excellent interpretation of the Wolfman. I think he's my favorite one on screen.
Movie.
Yeah, it's great.
I love that movie. It's really great. My only problem is the ending is like super abrupt. Like it's more abrupt than some of those Universal movies where it's like we hit the 70-minute mark, over.
It is quite.
And I also think it's a really great example of a horror comedy where the horror works and the comedy works.
Yes, I fully agree. It's a very rare instance of of that happening, of horror and comedy blending and making a great movie. I think this and Get Out are two of my favorites that do that.
But no, that's a really solid fucking movie. If anything about the werewolf kind of knocks it down for me in that, I think the execution of the final, of like the actual wolf form, is kind of spotty. It like changes sizes like 4 times in the scene.
It does a little, but it only changes sizes within like a foot. You know, it's not that. It's not like it changes size to like Van Helsing's size of werewolf and then back down. You know.
Yeah. But I mean, but other than that, that's a great movie. Have you seen the sequel?
No, I choose not to. What is your best interpretation of the werewolf, if not David from American Werewolf?
My best is another 80s movie. This is one which is, it doesn't have a single werewolf in it because it's kind of an anthology movie. It's The Company of Wolves, directed by Neil Jordan, who went on to do Interview with the Vampire. This is a really interesting, more folklore-based werewolf movie, and I tend to really like that when they go there. Because it's basically different stories being told by Angela Lansbury, the grandmother, to her granddaughter, who's basically Snow White. Not Snow White, Little Red Riding Hood. And it all builds up to an interpretation of Little Red Riding Hood, but like, there's a scene where they do like they basically do the skin peeling thing from Van Helsing, but it's done practically instead of just having fur under there. He's like a bloody mess. And and I think he gets killed before he can grow fur. But all the different scenes are really cool. It's very dreamlike, very great production design. Angela Lansbury is the grandmother. Awesome. And it actually has the whole thing is basically a metaphor for a young girl's coming of age. It's a really solid little fantasy werewolf movie, and I've really grown to like that one. There's one transformation where the guy's head goes back and the wolf's snout comes out of his mouth. Mm-hmm. And like some of the effects are a little dated, but I think taking them in the context of 1985, they're still pretty effective. They're not as good as the transformation from American Werewolf, but they're still impressive in their own right.
Yep. That's respectable. For my worst, I want to throw it out there. I did not choose Larry Talbot, Lon Chaney Jr. on any best, worst, or visually.
You can't choose him for worst.
Of course not. I am specifically choosing House of Dracula's interpretation of Larry Talbot. I
like the mustache.
The mustache is funny. It didn't. It wasn't relevant to my choosing of him. It just kept it out of visually the coolest. I'll tell you that much. But I think just the science and premise of like basically every aspect of this character's use in this movie makes it like my least favorite one. I think I'll start with the science. The science of your skull, the tumor, your brain's bigger during moonlight, which doesn't make sense even a little bit. He
becomes a werewolf because he has a thick skull.
He's really thick skull, which I know people that got a thick skull. They ain't no werewolves. The science is wackadoo, but even just the premise of like these characters are coming to him that they want to cure. Larry Talbot in character does want to cure. Sure, that's all well and good. Dracula absolutely does not. I don't understand that motivation at all.
Does he actually, though, or is it just an excuse to get into the house?
Why does he need an excuse? He got into the house.
I don't know.
Once he's in the house, he can be like, all right, time to be Dracula now and not go through with this crazy cure. But no, there's so many aspects about House of Dracula that just don't add up. And Larry Talbot's character in that, and I don't regard them as one continuity perfectly because there's so many retcons throughout them, but this is the biggest midichlorian moment of the Universal Monsters saga.
And Frankenstein doesn't do anything again,
and they won't stop not doing anything. So yeah, what is your worst interpretation of the Wolfman?
Okay, so I picked this one. It's one I barely remember again, and it's mainly just for one specific image in this movie. I picked Cursed from 2005. This is a Wes Craven movie that was hugely interfered with by the Weinsteins, and there was supposed to be these practical werewolves in it, but they reshot a ton of shit. They even changed the story a lot in reshoots, and they replaced everything with CGI. Christina Ricci, and I think her brother is Jesse Eisenberg, they hit a werewolf with their car, get bitten, and then they start turning into wolves, and there's like high school drama with Jesse Eisenberg, blah, blah, blah. It's trying to be Scream, but with werewolves. It's not that great of a movie, but the thing that really specifically just makes me go, oh, what the fuck, is their dog also gets bitten at some point? And it turns into a werewolf dog that looks like Wile E. Coyote running around on all fours.
That sounds pretty bad. I will say that if we were to jump to visually the coolest, I might have cheated, but I'm gonna say I didn't cheat because they're played by the same actor. CGI in in Van Helsing and 2010's The Wolfman. Now you might say to yourself, 2010's The Wolfman had practical effects. Totally did. You're absolutely right.
Sometimes.
Most of the time. But Anthony Hopkins transforming into the werewolf for the first time is the coolest thing ever. Love that. Anthony Hopkins' werewolf was mostly CGI. I really, really liked that, and the only problem with that is that the fight scene lasted 60 seconds, and then he was just beheaded immediately. But also the CGI in Van Helsing. I think Van Helsing's werewolves, to this day, are some of the coolest, visually, most interesting werewolves on screen. We have not seen werewolves that intimidating since. Like, for werewolves to be intimidating, you can't just have them be a normal wolf, because normal wolves aren't, unless you are stuck in the woods with like no equipment, no tools, and no flashlight, and no way to go home, well then any monster or beast or any normal thing could potentially be a threat to you. But werewolves, to be inherently terrifying in like a normal setting, you gotta make them more like larger than life. You gotta make them more than just a normal monster. And most of the time with werewolves, they're either a normal wolf or they turn into a dude with big hair and sideburns. Like, so for me, like I don't find the practical makeup effects of, say, Werewolf of London or 2010's Wolfman, I don't find those as terrifying because it's still a dude. Like 2010's Wolfman is fast. That's scary. They compensate for how unintimidating he looks because he's very scary. Like, there's scenes where there's just a dude standing in the forest and then boom, takes him right across the frame. He's done. That's fun. But if you want to talk about something that you just look at and you're like, I'm going the other direction, you're talking about Van Helsing's werewolf, where it's this Thanos-sized buff thing with a wolf head. Not a hybrid wolf head, a head of a giant wolf on a bipedal hominid body full of fur, claws, fangs, the whole nine. It is horrifying and haunting to look at. I keep it in visual because it's not the best version, not the best interpretation of the character. It's not beating David from American Werewolf in London. But visually, yeah, absolutely Van Helsing deserves more representation.
My visually the coolest, I picked up Curse of the Werewolf from 1961. This is Hammer's only werewolf movie. He's played by Oliver Reed, who you would know from Gladiator.
I sure would.
I'm going to send a picture to you in the chat in a minute, but it's this really interesting looking design where the fur is kind of gray and he has the pointy ears and stuff, and like the clothing is kind of shredded. It's a very influential design. I think it somewhat influenced the 2010 Wolfman's look.
Mm-hmm.
And Guillermo del Toro actually has a life-sized wax figure of this in his Bleak House, which there's I don't have the picture of it on me, but there's a picture of him standing next to it, which is really funny. But this is what it looks like, and I just think it's really cool. It's a design that really stuck with me from the first time I saw it.
Yep.
It's more folklore based, like it includes like the religious curse side of it. And I've also read the book it's based on, which is really, really good, called Werewolf of Paris. Very kind of different. It gets way more different as it goes along, but also very good. That's like the one like classic werewolf novel that exists.
Yeah, there's like no other ones.
Yeah.
But all right. I'll pick the monster next. I'm going to pick Creature of the Black Lagoon. I'm excited for this one.
Oh, yeah.
Bit. So, what is your best version of the creature? And follow-up question, is it just the creature?
Yeah, I almost went with Shape of Water, but I knew you were going to pick that one, so I'm like, let's not overlap.
My guy, I'm picking the creature as well.
I picked the original creature from the Black Lagoon.
Me too. That's
that
what I mean.
movie. That movie is just really good, and that design, instantly amazing. It holds up today, really. That original version of the suit. The eyes especially just... There's a scene of it when I was younger really creeped me out, where he climbs up onto the boat and is kind of sneaking up behind, and then she turns around and it cuts to a close-up shot, just the eyes in his mouth going... And that freaked me out as a kid.
Yep. Like, out of context, the image of the face where it's just doing this... You know, like it's kind of goofy, but in context, it's actually pretty useful and effective.
Underwater scenes, man, does it dominate in those underwater scenes.
Yes. I mean, I was when a few years ago when the last living Universal monster passed away. Of course, it was the young, fit swimmer of this monster. You know, because you live the longest when you're that healthy.
And also, it's 10, 20 years after the original Universal Monsters come out, so
True, he got bailed out by when it came out.
He has an edge. He got bumped by terms of time, and I think the reason why this characterization just really stuck around, because even though he is very monstrous, very brutal, it's also a sympathetic character, like some of the best of the Universal monsters, and it has that edge over a lot of the 50s era monsters like the Mole People or the Metaluna Mutant, because he has that characterization. Because he has a little glimmer of humanity amongst all the fishiness.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right about that, and I could not fully agree more. I'm barely talking about him because we mutually have the same best, and you're nailing all the points I want to say. I guess the only thing I would add is that I really appreciate the conception. You were saying the design holds up. It absolutely does. Just the iconic look of that Gillman with the claws and the fins and the forearms and the whole 9 yards. That is a look that has been copied in non-universal things. Not just Shape of Water, but like other interpretations like Monster Squad or whatever. I mean, hell, I'm one. I did Chapter 7. I did the same freaking thing, you know? It's the iconic design that is just, it's impactful. If that movie didn't get made, if that movie didn't come out, then you don't get that lasting legacy of what a swamp monster could be, where the first thing you think of, well, you probably first think of Man-Thing from Marvel, and then you second think of the creature's basic design, where he's a fish dude with claws and that big snarly mouth.
Swamp Thing from DC.
Yeah, they're kind of similar characters, but yeah, no, that creature is iconic for a reason. What is your worst version?
My worst version. Let me look at this. I picked the creature from The Creature Walks Among Us.
Me too.
Wow.
Wait. Before you continue, is your visually the coolest Amphibian Man from Shape of Water?
No.
Okay, then we'll hold off on that.
For it.
We'll hold off on that. I thought we were going to do a perfect triple trifecta here, because we mutually agree best and worst. It is easily the man-creature hybrid, but you can start us off.
Creature Walks Among Us, man. They take away everything that's cool about him. And the movie just sucks. Like, you don't even have a good movie around him. You have a bunch of characters which you can't tell apart because they look identical. And the one thing I like about it is I like the creature's kind of portrayal, kind of like character-wise, because I like how he's like very much upset by this. Like, it adds a different layer to the character. And I kind of like the ballsiness of ending your franchise movie with the iconic character. It's implied he's going to drown himself in the ocean because he can't live with this anymore. I kind of like that, but other than that, it's a weak design. The coat he wears is stupid, and it's a stupid movie plot.
I feel exactly like I felt 2 minutes ago. You're saying everything that I feel. Like, it is, on its own, you're right. It's a terrible movie. Put the design aside. It is a bad plot. I think it regresses from what the first, and to an extent the second movie did. The point of those creature movies is man versus nature, man leaving nature alone, and the consequences when you try and trifle the two. This one's like, let's just mix the two with no consequences. And it's just ridiculous. Like, first of all, it doesn't advance science at all. They kept saying like, oh, we're doing this to push the boundary. No, you're not. You're doing it because you want to put this stupid thing on the poster and make it 100 feet tall for no reason, and try and like take it in a new direction. But it doesn't take it in any direction but a bad direction. And then if you're going to talk about the visuals, I'm sorry, I just get so heated about this. Yeah. When you talk about the visuals, what a horrible concept for a man-creature hybrid. Everything cool about that creature is the creature's design. And you can play with the design a little as the story goes on, but you're literally removing the traits that make the creature so interesting. You're taking away the sharp claws. You're taking away the fins. You keep the face, which arguably is the least intimidating part of the whole design, and putting it on like a normal dude's body that's just a little bit wide. And the trench coat, the prison jumpsuit that it sits in is just, I am blown away by the creative decisions. This movie getting made is like a complete shock. It's like a system reset. Like, no way Universal, the same studio that made the first one and the second one, did this. I am shocked. And then of course, at the end, you could even have turned it around and been like, let's undo this horrible abomination. But you leave it not only vague, which most movies that have a vague ending are not good, but you leave it vague and keep him hybridized. I'm shocked that's the movie we got.
Yeah, and it's like, and they had already kind of fucked up the design in the second movie by giving him those stupid googly eyes.
They did, yeah. That was one of the only changes, and it was a noticeable one.
Yeah. And the second movie was still pretty good though. Like lowest
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes score of the franchise, my ass.
Let's move on to your visually the coolest or your spotlight and pretend like I didn't reveal mine.
So I did a visually the coolest. And I did this one because it's a design I really, really love just because I think it looks fucking cool. I thought about Shape of Water, but I just couldn't get this one out of my head. It is the creature, or the Gillman as he's called, in the Monster Squad. It is a solid as fuck redesign. I just don't like the stubby little tail they gave him. And they gave him they gave him big eyes, but they look good. And I don't mind the teeth either. And I can say visually he's cool. I just wish he was in the movie more and he didn't get killed with a single shotgun blast.
But not all, but most of the monsters go out like wimps on that one.
Yeah, but I mean, the creature, they'd have to gun him the fuck down in the first and second movies.
They could have at least harpooned him.
Yeah, get the harpoon gun, get the cocaine, because it was the 80s.
It was the 80s, yep, that's how it worked.
Get the cocaine, get the harpoon guns.
Yep, exactly.
Have Rudy steal a harpoon gun during the awesome 80s training montage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I just love that design.
I love it too, and it was in contention for me. But my number one is Amphibian, as I've already spoiled. I think Guillermo del Toro should have been given the license to make this official Universal monster canon, and just literally the only thing to change is make the whole thing green. Then it's the same thing. It
and
is so
it's,
good.
the face is different.
The faces, well, yeah, he took a lot from the Hellboy Doug Jones costume.
And you know
that they
what?
did.
If I wanted to be really bullshit, I could have picked Abe Sapien as
Yeah, that would be
the coolest. That would,
more bullshit than me picking LXG.
yeah.
But yeah, no. So Amphibian Man is awesome. Visually, I can't pick him as the best character because it kind of reminds me of why I had Lon Chaney Sr. as my favorite visual, but not my favorite character, because the prosthesis kind of inhibits your ability to emote so much. Most of the emotions you understand from the Amphibian Man are because he's in a scene where Sally Hawkins is doing all the emotional work and you understand the creature by proxy to her. But if we're talking visuals, Amphibian Man being this actual suit that this dude wore, Doug Jones, known for wearing crazy prosthetic monster suits, doing all-time best here. That thing is awesome. It is a visual treat. I talk a lot about, like, when I watch movies where this is why I like the third Mummy. Your eyes have something to do with what the character is, with what they're doing and stuff like that. You look at it, like any scene in The Shape of Water with the Amphibian Man in it, even if it's just like a shot, reverse shot, he's just standing there, he's just swimming, he's just staring at her, emoting. You can follow like the little gills and the crevices on his suit and just like admire it. And you could hypothetically linger on that shot for like 30 seconds before you realize, oh shit, why aren't we changing scenes? Like you're entranced by it. It's a beautiful design.
And what's interesting is that Del Toro's Creature remake was 2002 ish when he pitched that. And what's interesting is that it would have had the romantic angle of Shape of Water, but it was also supposed to be like a Victorian age expedition into the Amazon. And that there would have been like native cults worshipping the creature, which is kind of in Shape of Water, but it's just kind of like a mention.
Yep, absolutely.
And I'm like, that would have been really cool to see at the time, but Universal was not down. They were not down with the fish sex.
No, definitely not.
And then it wins Best Picture. Yeah.
It wins Best Picture, which is, I still contend, the most Chad story in all of Hollywood.
Yeah, we're considering an episode on that, right?
I'm trying to figure it out. It's just a fun story. I don't know how to make it a full episode, but it's just really fun.
Yeah. But if we do cover that, we'll have to cover his Frankenstein when that drops.
We will. I know we're supposed to take turns picking, but I think there's only two left. Let's just do Hunchback because we can end with Frankenstein.
Yeah, my Hunchback is kind of a thin category because I couldn't think of that many that I had seen. I only have a best and a worst. So do I go first or do you go first?
I think it's my turn to go because you
Okay, so you go.
it. So
Yeah, that's right.
I'll go. My best interpretation of Hunchback Notre Dame. It's kind of a left fielder. It's Disney's Quasimodo from Hunchback of Notre Dame. I really like that movie. I really like that interpretation. I really like what they did with that character. I mean, is it the most accurate to the book? Yes and no. You know, it adapts the book as well as you could probably adapt the book for a Disney movie. But I really like what little changes they did make. Quasimodo is more sympathetic here than in most other versions. A lot of other versions, he's just a dude to like fight at the end. But like he's genuinely like you feel bad for him, you feel the sympathy, you know. So I don't know, it stands out to me as the best one.
I picked The Hunchback of Notre Dame from 1939 with Charles Laughton as the Hunchback and guest starring in a minor cameo appearance, bit part. It's not a cameo. Rondo Hatton as Ugly Man. It's a really solid adaptation of the book. It does the Hollywood thing and it cuts out the downer ending, but it's still kind of a sad ending because he's left alone at the top of the cathedral at the end, and he's like wishing he talks to like the gargoyles and he says, "I wish I could be stoned like you are." It's a really moving little ending, and it's just a really solid fucking movie. I can't really say much more about it than that.
Yeah, definitely don't spoil it because I do want to watch that one day. But I will say that is not a Universal movie, so I haven't seen it, I think.
Yeah, it's not a Universal.
Okay, yeah. Well,
they only made the one.
Yep.
But no, it's a solid friggin' well cast movie.
Okay.
And the makeup is solid too. Like I don't have anything to complain about with it.
I have complaints because my worst is Disney's Quasimodo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, the sequel. Now let me explain.
I haven't seen that one.
So when I was a kid, I watched them both back to back, and I was like, "Yay, the good one!" And then I watched this one. Dude, this movie literally it. You know how they made Toy Story and then they were gonna make a sequel direct to video, but Toy Story 2 was so good they put it in theaters?
Yeah.
This is the exact opposite, where they made a movie, it was good, they put it in theaters, and then they were gonna make a sequel, and they're like, let's just make the laziest fucking. The animation is so cheap, like the budget just plummeted, which I don't know why, because the movie made money, the first one, so I don't know what the hell's going on. But
it's
the budget
because
plummeted.
I know what happened, but I'll let you finish.
Sure. But even just from a conceptual point of view, the movie starts with it, like continuity from the first one. The town loves him. He's like the most beloved guy ever, and he's like living it up. And like, yeah, there becomes conflict later. Honestly, I was so young. I don't remember the story much, but like from my point of view, I was like, wow, all the interesting stuff ended after the first one ended. So now you're just following up, and you're just like, yay, let's all be hunky dory again. And literally, from a character point of view, it just regresses and backtracks on all the things that make the Hunchback interesting across all of his adaptations. So I did not vibe with that at all. I was like, wow, it's like a polar opposite. It's such a step beyond. It goes so far into comedy too. Like that first one has heart and comedy. This one has some comedy.
Doesn't he have like a hunchback girlfriend in that movie?
Yes. Oh, yes, he does. Yes, he does. That is another creative decision that kind of irked me at that point. But again, I'd have to rewatch the movie, which I do not plan on doing to tell you more about it. I just know that in my heart, it is the worst adaptation.
The reason why it's shitty is because Disney sequels at the time were made just to hold on to the license. And so they had a whole studio called Toon Disney where they just made a ton of shitty direct-to-video sequels. And occasionally you'd get like an okay one like Lion King 2. But there was all these shitty sequels to Disney movies that were just cranked out straight to video in the 90s and the 2000s.
So when was the book written? Copyright law is at 96 years. I don't know if that's true in the 90s, if it was
it's
extended
18 something. I forget.
18 something. What the hell are you? What? What license? Does the license of their own film expire before the 96 years?
I don't know. I just know that it's licensing stuff, and partly just to cash in. I think they would just make tons of sequels.
That's my thing. Yeah, that's what I kind of interpreted as like, oh, DVD, direct to DVD is like, oh, we don't want to spend real money on an actual sequel, but we do want to capitalize on what we can for a sequel, so we'll just get like the $5 bin at Walmart. Like, that's how I've always viewed it.
And that's probably why Lion King 2 is decent, is because they actually tried with that one.
Exactly. And they're not going to lose the license to their own. Like, Sony makes Spider-Mans constantly because that character isn't theirs. But Disney, that's a free use character, they made their own interpretation. So they can wait 95 and a half years before making Hunchback 2. They don't got to rush shit.
They also would do this thing where they would make like Bambi 2, which is like set in between scenes of Bambi.
I feel like I would feel very similar as Bambi 2. If that was a Universal monster, that'd be in the worst section, Bambi 2.
So I kind of was in a bind because I wanted to at least get 2 in this category, And so I kind of came up with a default worst,
Okay.
which is, it's not a movie I hate, but I'm not like in love with it or anything. My default was Hunchback 1923 because it hasn't stuck with me.
Okay.
And Lon Chaney's really good in it, but it's not. But I mean, this is default worst, so it's not. I'm not saying it is the worst. It's just by default, it's not that good.
I have my criticisms. I'm not moving on, but I'm gonna add to your point by telling you my visually the coolest is Lon Chaney 1923.
Really,
Yes,
he is good. He does look really good.
he looks amazing. Like I was saying earlier, Lon Chaney Sr. adds so much with his physicality because it's a silent film. You see him. I think he emotes so much more in this than in Phantom because he's swinging around, he's running, he's moving. You see it, you feel it. You know, that movie. I fully agree. I have my criticisms with it, and you know, I see why you would put it in the worst. I can't even. I'm one of the only guys in the world who doesn't have that as like one of the top Universal monster movies.
I think it's just a top Universal monster movie by default because when they were making merch in the '90s, they included that.
Yeah, exactly.
Universal doesn't even release it anymore. You have to buy like a shitty public domain copy. Like they seem like ashamed of like their silent icons for some reason. They do the whole franchise box set and they just put the one Phantom of the Opera in there. They don't put the other one that they made.
Yeah, right. It's fucking wild.
Yeah. And it's not even a movie I have any particular dislike for. I was just in the bind and went, well, it's the worst one I've seen.
Well, there aren't that many, especially by Universal movies, but there's been others from other studios. I haven't seen many outside of Universal's interpretation.
I mean, if the Disney remake ever gets off the ground, maybe that will be default worst.
Who knows? It could be visually the coolest. They got good effects now. Who knows?
Maybe Mufasa will be really good.
Maybe. Rest in peace, James Earl Jones.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's move on to the creme de la creme. Now we're concluding with the big gut punch here. It is Frankenstein. It is the most iconic one. I think the best is Boris Karloff in the trilogy of Frankenstein, his trilogy there of the five. I really sat with this. I really thought about it. I had a few other contenders because since then, other versions are more book accurate. Other versions technically have more screen time and emote more. But I just keep going back to this. I think it's the best interpretation of the character we've seen. A lot of interpretations are not book accurate. Very, very few of them are accurate to the book. Dracula, on the other hand, has so many interpretations. A lot are accurate and a lot aren't, and then there's a lot in the middle. But Frankenstein... Well, yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to say, there's a lot of Frankensteins where they draw from the book, but they'll draw like bits and pieces from it.
They'll draw bits and pieces, but you rarely see yellow skin, chin-length hair. You know what I mean? You rarely see the few descriptions. So Boris Karloff is not book accurate, whether visually or character-wise. He gets character-wise in Bride of Frankenstein, but we'll get there. I respect it so much because it sticks with me. You know, of all the adaptations of Frankenstein, many of which take from his interpretation here, this one stands out to me as the best. It's the most impactful. It has the most to do. Maybe it's because it's 3 movies, so it's like 4 hours by their standards. It has the most going on, and those 3 in isolation before they start crossing them over and making worse movies, I think is an excellent, strong trilogy. I think it really works as a character study. So, yeah,
I gotta say,
Bride.
I also picked Karloff.
Yeah.
I only specified Frankenstein and Bride on my list, but I do really love Son of Frankenstein, so we'll count this as a total overlap.
Sure, why not?
And I agree with everything you say. It's a great arc for the character. I like how the design evolves over the movie. I love the fucking vest from Son of Frankenstein. That's a really cool idea. I don't know why they got rid of it. It was awesome. And I mean, it's a great humanizing portrayal of the monster. Karloff really brings it. I specifically included the 2 James Whale movies because that's like a strong arc across the 2 movies of the character.
A part of me really wishes James Whale did a third one of his choosing, and that was the end. Because if the third one was as good as the first 2, you're talking all-time trilogies right there, you know?
Although he really didn't want to do a third one because
he didn't want to do the second one.
Yeah, but his original ending for the second movie was everybody blows up at the end, so he didn't have to do another one. But that got changed by studio mandate. And I think by the time Son was being made, he was kind of out of favor at the studio because there was new management. And they had clashed over, he was doing the, I think it was the sequel novel to All Quiet on the Western Front, and the studio heads fucked it up and added slapstick into it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so he had kind of he had kind of sort of withdrawn as a director, and then he made like a jungle adventure movie whose sets got recycled into the mummy's hand.
I will say, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I know that like James Whale didn't want to do another one. He didn't want to do Bride at all. He wanted there to be one Frankenstein, and the studio pressured him into it. And he's like, well, if it's gonna happen, I may as well step in and do it. And he did it, and it's in some respects even better than the first one.
Yes.
So if that happened one more time, if James Whale actually wanted to do a third one, they would have done a third one, or he would have done a third one. I mean.
Yeah.
They obviously did one anyway. Because then the bride could come back and have more to do than one stupid minute of screen time.
There you go with the bride again.
Exactly, man. Maybe even like if you don't get Boris Karloff back, which you did because Sun came out, you could just get Elsa Lancaster back, and you could just do so much more with her. I don't know, but whatever. I love Boris Karloff's interpretation.
But I do think Son of Frankenstein is really cool. I like the addition of Igor. I like the relationship between Igor and the monster. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. The main problem with that movie is just the pacing. The movie is very long by Universal standards. It's like 99 minutes.
Yes, yeah.
And there's a little bit too much back and forth in the third act. But other than that, I like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're agreed on that one.
Worst, I will bet money you do not have my worst, because despite everything that you've seen that I haven't, I don't think you've seen this one. I'm going to challenge you on this right now. My worst, I had to look it up, is Koji Furuhata as Frankenstein in Frankenstein Conquers the World. Because
I've seen that movie, but it's not on my list.
Well, at least you didn't pick it, but damn it, you've seen it. This is a wild movie. Just conceptually.
It's Toho, baby.
The Japanese government captured Frankenstein's heart in a submarine, the monster's heart, and they made it into a monster with nukes so he could fight another monster, and they're trying to stop both of the monsters, but they made both This is a wild movie. I watched it because somebody whose stream's called Absurd Boy, the Absurd Show, he reached out to me. He's like, oh, I'm a fan of your Monsterthon. Come do some stuff. I think I did 2 streams with them. I did this, and oh god, I'm blanking on the other film I watched with them. But
was it War of the Gargantuas?
Yes, so it's also called
War of the Gargantuas.
Sequel. That's the
sequel.
Oh no, I didn't watch War. I watched this, and I watched some Thanksgiving movie that was very low budget and bad. But regardless, this movie, I don't know if I had a worse version of Frankenstein prior, but during watching, I'm like, oh, this one right here, that's the one. That's it. That's the one. Hands down. Every other version of Frankenstein has like something I can latch onto, like versions that people don't like. Say Van Helsing's version, I can say, well, it's incredibly book accurate as compared to other versions, like even Boris Karloff.
He's not that bad. He's just not in the movie that much, and some of the design elements are a little janky,
the design element is something that people can absolutely criticize. That's fair. It's like a steampunk thing, but it's a character. It's a great. This is horrible. This is a horrible version of Frankenstein. It's a terrible movie, but just
it's
the
a Japanese. It's a Japanese caveman.
It's a Japanese caveman sized up to 100 feet so he can fight a dude in a rubber suit, and
he can fight a dinosaur.
I don't even know if I can call it the worst character. There isn't a character. I had a similar problem with the other monster we talked about, but like, damn, there's nothing there for him.
It's a weird movie.
It's a very weird movie.
I have a fondness for it because I like those old Toho movies. But it's so the plot in that one is beyond bizarre even for them.
Well,
but it's
pray tell.
The Nazis took a heart made by Dr. Frankenstein, took it to Japan, it got bombed in Hiroshima, and then grows into a person who grows into a giant and fights a dinosaur, who is weirdly popular in Japan but nowhere else. Baragon.
Yeah, so pray tell, my friend, what could possibly be worse than freaking that?
So, okay. This is Hammer's final appearance on my lists. I'm not, before I specify which one it is, I'm not that big of a fan of the Hammer Frankensteins on the whole because the monsters are just kind of there for most of them. Like, it's more about Dr. Frankenstein, played by Peter Cushing, and the monsters are just part of the plot. This one is the worst one, though, because the third movie, The Evil of Frankenstein, they got a distribution deal with Universal, which is how they made The Mummy. And they decided, let's retcon the first 2 movies so that we can have, like, a monster that looks kind of like the Karloff version, but not. And so, like, the first act of the movie is his current lab gets destroyed by some asshole. And then he goes back to his old castle, recounts the story of how the original monster was created, and this is like 15, 20 minutes of the movie. And it's this weird, not good looking design. And the plot of the movie is that he finds it frozen in an ice cave on top of a mountain. But like its brain is all fucked up from being frozen. So he gets a carnival hypnotist to like waken up its mind and bring it back to life a bit. And then the hypnotist, who's like this dumb fucking idiot, is like, I'm going to control the monster and I'm going to be the captain now. And it's them like fighting each other, blah, blah, blah. It's so lame.
That does sound pretty rough.
And I'm going to find the design for you. It's a weird, it's like it wants to be the universal design, but not really.
I guess while you look that up, I will talk about the visually the coolest design. So I really sat with this. This was the one I took the most time on because, like Dracula, Frankenstein has tons and tons and tons of adaptations in movies for like the past 100 years since they've done it in like the 1910s, 1900s even, 1900s. There's lots and lots of versions of the Frankenstein monster. And a lot of great ones and a lot of bad ones, just from a design standpoint. Oh my God, you sent me the hammer one. Jesus Christ, that's a paper mache man. Is that a bolt in his neck? Is he really doing that? I'm just going to call it right now. If we had visually uncoolest, that'd be in there. But my visually the coolest version of Frankenstein is a pick that's it's not obscure. People have heard of this movie, but it's a definitely out of left field pick. It is the stunt actor Spencer Wilding, who does a lot of different things, in Victor Frankenstein from 2015.
Oh, I did
I have
like
my
that
problems
one.
with this movie. Yeah, it's a good movie. I think it's good. It's watchable. I usually like Max Landis' writing. He's pretty talented.
James McAvoy was
It's
really
not
cool.
one of my favorite versions. He's great. Daniel Radcliffe, them together as a duo was just amazing on-screen chemistry. But I have my problems with the movie. That design, first of all, it's more book accurate than most. He's got like the palest, ugliest skin instead of just having stitches everywhere. He lands. It's like one shot, really. He gets like a minute of screen time. He's got as much screen time as the bride has in Bride of Frankenstein. And he's just standing there. He's like 8 feet tall. He's got no hair. And he's staring down at James McAvoy, his creator. And for me, it's like, yeah, the movie was kind of rocky road to get there. But once it got there, I'm in it. Like, wow. Like I wish there was another movie, because now it's at the point where it's like, this is like the best part. Finally, we're getting to the part they actually care about, and it ends. And it's like, damn it. So from a pure conceptual point, a visual design point, man, that is an excellent, excellent version. I think it's my favorite looking one. I really wish they made more.
I would have liked that. That's a movie that apparently had character development was like hacked out of the movie by the studio, which wouldn't surprise me. But I remember enjoying that one way more than I remember. Critics were like vicious about that movie when it came out, and I watched it and I'm like, it's okay. But funnily enough, this is the category where I picked, or I decided to spotlight a lesser known movie. It's also from 2015, and it is Xavier Samuel's interpretation of the monster in Frankenstein 2015 from Bernard Rose, the director of Candyman. Carrie Ann Moss is the main Frankenstein scientist. Her screen time was limited, but she's really good. But what you're basically doing is that you're following the Xavier Samuel monster as he goes out into the world. And he ends up on the streets of L.A. living with homeless people, one of whom's a blind man played by Candyman himself, Tony Todd. And his mind is progressing. He's going from like a baby to a child to an older person as it's going through, and the subtlety to the performance is really good as he's like kind of like learning things and grasping them. And while he's also physically decaying because something got screwed up in the process, and you watch him like get uglier and uglier as it goes along, at one point you see the full extent of it, and it's a really heartbreaking scene because he doesn't comprehend really what's going on with him. The problem with the portrayal is that there's a lot of voiceover that's taken directly from the book, and it doesn't really fit this interpretation of the character. So it's inconsistent. And the movie also does, like, it tries to do the angry mob thing, but it does it in a way that's kind of weird, where he gets, like, dragged behind a tractor by people with pitchforks. And it also tries to comment on police abuse and violence, but there's, like, one asshole cop who keeps showing up everywhere he goes. It's like, why are you assigned to, like, every district of, like, Southern California? And it doesn't help that guy's like the worst actor in the movie.
That's rough. Wow.
But it's a good movie though. It's worth checking out at least once just for, the good parts of it.
What was the title again?
Frankenstein 2015.
Oh, okay. So a different 2015 Frankenstein adaptation.
Yeah.
I didn't pick that up at all. That's funny. All right. Well, hey, that's been the entire show. I don't know what it's going to be cut down to, but I'll tell the audience right now, the raw cut right now is 2.5 hours. So
Yeah.
this is by far and away our longest episode.
This is our Killers of the Flower Moon cut.
This is our Killers of the Flower Moon. We're going to cut nothing at all, even though it should have been. We'll catch you guys next time. And yeah, see you guys out there and keep watching great and terrible versions of these characters so we can keep talking about them over and over again.
Keep making them.
Keep making them, please. God, keep making them.